Welcome back to part 2 of our D&D terrain piece painting. I'm going to show you how we go from this to this. And I know this photo isn't as good as the before shot, but that's not why you're here. It's JC from Useful 3D Prints in Melbourne, and we're working on the first floor of Mole's Hideout from DM Stash. This is the first level of the terrain piece that we can actually physically play with our models in, so we're painting both the outside and the inside of this piece. If you saw part 1 where we did the rooftop itself, you would have heard me mention that I'm really happy that part of what I learned early on in the last process was what I didn't want to do. And that was I didn't want to start my wood tones as light as I did, because I needed to wash it back to add some depth and contrast. So we started darker here, meaning I got to skip the wash step, which saves time and money. Washes are expensive, and I don't recommend washing a full terrain piece. Start your base coats a bit darker, hit it with a dry brush so you can get the depth and contrast you desire. This is where we start going in with that actual dry brushing attempt. As you can see, I'm not being quite methodical. I'm going in, I'm a little bit erratic. Some parts are a little bit heavier, some parts are a little bit lighter. This is something that works really well for organic materials. They're not often uniform. There will be discrepancies in like how they reflect light, the color that they have in them, all things like along those lines. So what you can do is that by being a little bit heavier handed in some parts and a little bit lighter on some other parts, it adds a bit more depth to something that is organic. You don't want it to look super polished, super pristine, super precise. The next step that we're going into is I'm touching up the outside to put some more details in the woodwork. I'm going at this with a really large brush. One thing that I notice a lot of new painters do is they tend to gravitate towards the smallest paintbrush they've got to do things. I see it all the times with my friends when I'm trying to teach them how to paint new things. They'll go for a 00 or a 0 size brush, and realistically you want to be comfortable using the largest brush that you can for what you're painting. So in this instance, I'm smashing through these colors just with I think this is a size 4 brush, and I'm just putting one single coat on. One single coat. We're not going to go back in and touch it again. We just want a really nice clean coverage, because this is part of how we save time on these larger projects. Pick out the things that you need to have specific finer details on, leave them on like kind of the other side of the project, and then pick out the ones that are going to do the heavy lifting for the least amount of effort. That's all about wood grain. So to start with, I had an airbrush, then it was a dry brush, and now I've just gone in with a regular brush to do some other coating, and that's pretty much it. That's majority of our project done. Then it's just on to the finer details. So tip number 3 would also be when you're doing your other spot colors, so like I am here with the fancier woodwork, this is kind of more the polished wood. I'm going in with the same type of brown for most of the parts of this project. It's slightly different from the wood that I used at the start of the project on like the outside of the building on the larger pillars, but it's something that's distinguishably different without adding. I'm not going in with 4 different browns. I'm just going to go in with one brown for one type of tone, one brown for another type of tone. If you're changing it up and mixing in between a bunch of different browns and a bunch of different colors, it's going to take time and it's going to add more time to your project that you may not be able to afford. If you've got a lot of stuff that you want to get done, or it's a significantly large piece and you're on a time crunch, making choices to keep colors closer in certain families, or even just using the same type of color for multiple pieces, will save you time, and across larger pieces, it still works. If you're painting one model, like a tiny model with all the same colors, it's not going to quite sell the effect as well as it would here, but for the larger pieces, it really does sell the effect. As you can see now, we're also got a few more of our spot colors pushed in. We've got our green, we're doing our reds, and then eventually we'll get onto our metallics that help make the rest of the room pop. You want to be aiming for small amounts of these impact colors. We want to keep it relatively neutral overall. That's where our woodwork is a relatively neutral tone. We've got some organic tones in terms of our greens, which we'll add a little bit more work to. And then we've got these really vibrant red stools. It helps provide a bit of interest to the model without being overpowering. So really nice thing about saving time on the front end of the model, where I was talking about in the earlier components of this video, when you save time at the start, you are less burnt out and you have more capacity and more drive to be able to finish off those finer details, to get those small things that make a project really pop. So on these bushes, I did just a standard base coat, I did a wash, and then I did a dry brush, and they've come out looking really impactful across the actual project. We've done the same thing for the red chairs. The reason why it's important to save that capacity essentially at the start of a project is because we're all human. Enthusiasm waxes and wanes through a project. You want to save time where you can to be able to apply that effort where you want to. So as you can see here, now we're coming into the final leg of this terrain piece. I've done some of the scripture, I've done some of the kind of finer details and things like that just to make it pop and give it a bit more flavor. I'm really happy that this project has, even though like I've been painting for 20 years and this project has still taught me something. And it's also reiterated and highlighted something that I already know to be very true, that I think some people don't comprehend, which can help with painting. Going in with the right expectations, right? Setting up how you want something to look, and then being realistic with yourself on like, can I get that done at kind of the level that I want it to? I don't paint a whole lot of terrain. I really enjoyed this, but I think part of what I really enjoyed is that I went into it knowing that it wasn't going to be the best piece of work that I've ever done. It was something that I'm still going to enjoy, and there were some things that I was going to stuff up, and I could either spend the time to fix it, or I could just kind of spend a little bit of time trying to correct some small things here and there rather than abandoning the project. Finished is better than perfect, and it's really important that if you go into something, you have realistic expectations of what you want to do, because then it's going to be easier for you to get that job done. And even if it's not perfect at the end of it, you can still look at it and be really happy with it. I'll see you guys on the next one. That's where we start painting the basement level. Thanks. Bye.